All right. Um, I am here with Gordon to have a conversation about this book that that he wrote over the last kind of a number of years, right?
Yeah, it took about 4 years to get it done.
Yeah. And uh yeah, and so I guess I have two things kind of on my mind about the book.
Sure.
One of which is like I thought it would be cool to just give it more surface area on the internet by recording a conversation with you. Two is I thought it'd be fun and then two is I thought it would be fun to digest having just read the entire thing yesterday with you. And in particular, one of the things that I'm interested in exploring with you is, which maybe not the place to start, but is like something like I had the impression to some degree reading this of like, wow, this is a really great condensed summary of a bunch of things that I haven't seen written in a lot of haven't seen in a lot of places, but
hmm
that feel pretty core to how I see the world. And I was curious to something like almost like have you quiz me on like, do I actually get it, or have I just pattern matched
Oh,
what you wrote
interesting.
into something I think I understand, but I'm sort of like missing some insight that I could get if I didn't do that.
Interesting.
Um,
Okay. Yeah, I don't
and
exactly know off the top of my head how to quiz you on this. Like, I don't have like a
yeah, um,
exercise set up for it.
sure,
But
no, totally, um, and I don't think it doesn't need to be super formal, but there's the general feeling of like talking to somebody
right.
and feeling like, do they get it? Do they not get it? Are they saying things that are true but are not the central point? Um,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Right. I think that in fact, to some extent, I think this is part of why I wrote the book. Like, it is not the primary reason I wrote the book. Um, but I know writing it down um
Helped you clarify,
helped
maybe.
me
Right.
clarify. And
There's
there are these
this,
like just subtle things.
yeah, there's
Yeah.
that great quote that's something uh, like everything is vague to a degree you don't understand until you try to make it precise,
Hmm.
or something. And
Right.
it's often used as like, here's a good reason to write things, like just to attempt to write a blog post about something is like, will clarify your thoughts immensely. Um, for, this conversation serving two purposes, one of which is between you and I, and the other of which is, or it is existing in two mediums, the others, which is we intend to post it. Let's say something about what this book is about, which is
Yeah.
ironically related to the quote that I just have, like everything is vague to a degree you do not understand until you
Yeah,
attempt
that's
to make
right.
it precise. Um, and I feel like you're kind of embodying a stance with this book of optimism about like, no, things can be made precise. Also, you can't make them, and there aren't even really limits to how precise you can make them. You just can't ever
Hmm.
like precision
That's
somehow is
right.
almost different from the grounding aspect of.
Yeah, I would say that that's right. I mean, there may in fact be like practical limits to how precise your
Yeah,
knowledge
yeah,
can be, or like the precision, like it sort of means by what you mean by precision, right? Like, we can achieve sort of like a high degree of mathematical precision as long as you're willing to restrict yourself to like mathematical abstractions and be like, this is precise within the world of mathematical abstractions, right? And it draws
right.
like really clear lines and like we could not possibly be more precise. Um, but then yeah, maybe it's not well grounded. Uh, Otherwise, I think we often face like compute challenges, right? Like just in our own brains of our ability to
Mm-hmm.
work out the details or
Yeah,
how fine of like a instrument can we build
right,
uh to get more precise measurements. But
right.
yeah, so to circle back on this, yeah, what is the book about? Well, it's titled Fundamental Uncertainty because it makes this argument that the uncertainty in our knowledge is not just the surface characteristic, which I think many people treat it as. They think of it as, or I shouldn't say, well, when I say many people, what I really mean is there's a particular type of person who sort of has this deep-seated belief that that somehow like everything is knowable if we just try hard enough. And I'm very sympathetic to this position because in fact, like the book exists in part because I used to at some point have this belief.
Yeah, you used to be that guy.
Right. And it caused me a lot of problems. It made it really hard for me to think about the problems I was trying to solve. The book sort of grew out of me attempting to do a bunch of AI safety research stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and I had to like sort out and kept running into these like epistemological questions that were standing in my way. Um, but there's a certain type of person who has this belief. They sort of think that like, yeah, if we just had like better measurements, thought longer, were smarter, we could figure it out. We could know stuff. Um, and unfortunately, that's just sort of not true. So the book tries to walk you through these arguments for why, but it really just comes down to the fact that our knowledge is ultimately based on assumptions that we have to make. These assumptions can't be justified. The reason they can't be justified is there's various ways to talk about it. In the book, I talk about the problem of the criterion. I think this is a good way to do it to make this argument, but you could talk about infinite regress in
Right, right.
inference or other things like that.
Yeah.
Um, and so because of this, that means that like we are making unjustified assumptions, but we're just because the assumption isn't justified in the sense of like I have a story that prove why this assumption is true, doesn't mean there isn't a reason why you're making that assumption. And so then the book goes on to make an argument that the assumptions that we make are grounded in assumption in usefulness.
Hmm.
What is practical for us to
Hmm.
do the things that we want in our life? And what does it mean to be useful? Well, that means that we, in some sense, care about it. And so this grounds it out in values, right?
Hmm.
What we care about. And I don't mean this at just a like surface level, although that's also true. But this really goes pretty deep, sort of to the deepest levels of like, I am a thing that exists and I would like to keep existing. So, in
Yeah.
some sense, like survival is like really important to me.
Hmm.
And this has large implications on how I view the world because I need to view the world through a lens that helps me continue to exist.
Yeah.
And so it sort of propagates from there. And I'm not saying that like it's bad to view the world this way. The point is more so that there's no view from nowhere. So it's useful to understand where that not nowhere is. Where are we and where are those things
Right.
that
What are the
influence?
particular not nowheres that we've each been given that we're starting with? And I love how you at the end of the book you have this like little 1.5 page a note to AI.
Oh yeah.
Basically like I realized partway through writing this book that AIs would read it given that it's published on the internet, and that also like it's worth noting that these issues are, you know, the uh these issues affect any kind of sense-making system. They're not specific to humans. And it is really interesting the way that people talk about being only human, or like, oh, it's human limitations, but it's like, no, there are fundamental cognitive trade-off limitations and combinatorial explosion issues with relevance realization, as Vervaeke would put it. And like, you can't not be dealing with those. Like, you can't, and the view from nowhere thing is like another way of saying that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think this is one of the really interesting things about AI, and I'm honestly still trying to like think about this and figure this out. Um, but like, what does it mean? Like AI, like the epistemology of AIs is like, I think an interesting topic to explore more. And I don't think we've really explored it enough. In
Like the
particular,
epistemology of like what it is to know something as an AI.
yeah, essentially, right.
Yeah.
Like, I think we have some clues about this, right? Like, we understand, to some degree, details about the low level internals of AI,
Hmm.
and we understand something about the high level externals, we might say, of like, what is the text that gets produced when I put in a prompt? Um, but there's
Hmm.
this middle layer that, as humans, we think a lot about, right? Our own middle layer of how do I go from breathing in air and eating some food to saying some words, right? And with AI, we don't really understand that middle part very much. Um, and there is likely
What even
some
is the
sort of
middle part for like a language model?
Yeah, I guess
It-
this is like how do um why do certain nodes in the network get activated versus others?
mm,
Why is the signal passing through the network the way it is to produce particular tokens as
mm,
output given particular inputs? Um, like we don't fully understand this in ourselves. Like like when you say words to me, I say particular words back. But we have some sort of model of, oh, like I have certain beliefs
yeah.
and thoughts and desires, and these sort of like mixed together in a way that produces um whatever words that I say back to you. And I think
Mm,
that's an area where we don't understand that well. So it's harder for me to say like right now, okay, how does AI think about truth? I don't know. Like it's not entirely clear what that actually means to an AI in a like non-abstract way. I mean, really talking about LLMs here, but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
how do they conceive it for themselves, right? And how is that like embodied in the way that they end up
Right.
producing
Well,
output
and they
tokens?
seem to be kind of for how good they are at things, they seem to be kind of astonishingly bad at present, talking to you in June 2026. The important thing to tag when you're trying to talk about what
Oh,
AIs
sure.
can and can't do. Um uh that they can code all these incredible things. They have so like a vast number of facts about the world memorized, um and yet like they don't seem to be very good at differentiating between knowing things, like knowing what like, they don't seem to be able to sort of check, wait, do I actually know this, or is this just something I'm
Right.
inclined to say? um Even though there are differences in that, both in the sense that like the model just in fact sometimes is saying stuff that it sort of will say consistently, and other times it's saying stuff that it'll say a different answer each time or something like that. And that like there's even they found in with Mechanterp they found like um parts of the model that will light up when it is being performative versus being versus like actively lying versus like being honest versus these different kinds of
Mm.
registers of meaning it, like, but on a different level also, like it feels like it feels to me like in some sense AIs don't mean it in general, like the thing that it is to mean
Yeah.
it, the current LLMs sort of don't have. um and part of where that intuition I think comes from, and I have a lot of humility about this, and a lot of I sort of go back and forth about a bunch of these questions, but part of that is the sense of like it's very confusing to sort of feel what it means to have any skin in the game as an LLM. Like, first of all, like,
Right.
are we talking about the model and its weights? Are we talking about the personality that gets evoked by that model if you don't do anything weird and just say hi? Are we talking about like the personality that gets evoked by the model if you something like jailbreak it and sort of like feel like you've given it more of a space to not just be the assistant character? Are we talking about the model as a lineage that includes multiple iterations, but is sort of all kind of one thing with one name that you might make some generalizations about? Um, where is the to what extent do any of those have skin in any game? You know,
Yeah.
and does the like a lot of this relates to stuff that we've been thinking a lot about at Softmax around like um so we're trying to teach AIs, create learning environments for AIs to learn to care. And one of the weird things about that is that like it seems plausible, maybe necessary. I'd have to walk through the argument in detail to really see that in order to exhibit genuine care towards another, you need to first have a sense of one of a selfness that you're caring for, not necessarily
Yeah.
an ego structure self. Like a very simple animal does not have an ego structure self, but they do have a uh, some. Well, then there's ego structure self, like identity across time, but then there's even just like where I end and the world begins, and even very simple animals implicitly have this.
That's right. Yeah,
right?
like
Even they may not have a model of it, which like by contrast, like a chimp may or something like that.
right, but even like maybe not to pick on sheep, right? But like, if you've ever like spent much time around sheep, it's clear that like they're not that smart, right? And in fact, like we've bred sheep to not be smart. Like why like the wild precursors to sheep were almost certainly much smarter than like what we
Uh,
have today.
yeah,
We like intentionally made them like less smart through domestication. Um, and yet even they seem to exhibit some degree of like care, right? They certainly like exhibit some amount of um, care for their children, right? And
totally.
like care for each other, like care for the flock, like
Hmm. Well,
and
and even a bacteria, has some
right.
sense of it cares that there's sugar over there and is going to sort of go over there,
Yes,
and it
that's right.
cares that there's poison over here and is going to wiggle away
Right.
from the poison and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. It's like
Well, and
following these tiny gradients.
and this gets like something really interesting that I haven't quite sorted out for myself, which is that like when I talk about care here, um, I'm really talking about sort of what in my mind is like a deeper type of care. Like I picked the word care and use it in the book as sort
Hmm.
of like a way to sneak in some like philosophy that I didn't want to get into in the context of the book. It wasn't really necessary. Um, which is really this like Heideggerian notion of care, which is this like bigger and deeper thing that sort of comes down to it's not just like the explicit things that you say like, oh, I care about this, I care about that. It's the like, what are the things that like your actions are directed to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is
I
like,
love that you brought in cybernetics in the book. Like, I mean, the book
yes.
is really like such a tour of ideas that have influenced me so much as well.
Yeah. Well,
Meaningness and cybernetics and like,
yeah, I admit that like a little bit the book couldn't help but be like, okay, here's a bunch of stuff. Like in some ways, the way I think about it is I'm like putting together this puzzle out of like a
hmm
bunch of pieces
hmm
that are maybe puzzle's the wrong metaphor, but we'll go with it and see how it goes, right? Like I've got a bunch of pieces. I in
hmm
fact have more pieces that were not used in the book.
I'm sure.
Um,
Yeah, I can only imagine.
but like these were the ones that if I put them together, maybe it's like a mosaic, right? Like I grabbed some like of the little like tiles and stuff, right? And these are the ones that made sense to like draw this picture out of
Right.
like using these pieces. And yeah, like cybernetics, I think is like a really great way to talk about this, especially for because I'm writing the book towards this like sort of this like STEM type audience, right? Like
hmm
definitely I'm imagining not just the type of person I am, but the type of person who like might work on AI, right? Like,
hmm
um, that's certainly the problem that I care the most about, have cared the most about throughout my life.
hmm
And I want other people working on this to like, I would hate for them to fail to understand the things that I feel like I understand because I didn't bother to communicate them, right? And so it's like, okay,
Yeah,
let me
yeah, yeah.
pull all these pieces together,
Can I
tell a
be like a
story.
tiny giant that others can stand on? Can I like sort of
Yeah, that's
put
right.
a brick in the wall of like or in the cathedral of human understanding?
That's right.
Yeah.
And so, in a lot of ways, there's not. Uh, uh, I think you'd be hard pressed to like find like anything like any idea in the book that is like new, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
in any real sense. It is the novelty is entirely, if there is
In the
any,
presentation.
in the presentation and
Yeah.
like pulling these pieces together, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
there,
I love the style also of being like, look, you might need more references for some of these, but like you can find them.
right. I think
Like,
that like, yeah, it would be great if I wrote a like in some sense, like as an author, right? I love the idea that, oh, I wrote this like giant tome, right? I wrote this like 1,000 page book and it like has huge heft and it like sits on the bookshelf and
mm-hmm.
you're like, wow, that's like
Yeah.
impressive. I can't believe that he wrote that,
Someone
right?
assembled that.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, look, it's just not going to happen. I just like don't care. Like I could maybe in the not too distant future when AI writing is less slop like,
You could
maybe
have an
maybe I could have
annotated
produced.
network version. But even at that point, it's like you might as well just have like a version of the book on the website that you can chat with.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A thought that came to mind for me talking to you about this. Well, a couple things. One is maybe I'll try to put them together. So I could imagine another thing that you could do to sort of again create more surface area for this book. The book's available for free online, right? Like
That's
you
right.
also have
Yeah.
these paper copies that um, you gave
Yeah,
me
that's
one
right.
of.
If you want a paper copy, there is a paper copy. It's also available as like an ebook form.
Yeah,
The ebook form is also sort of locked up. You have to pay for it, but the free
yeah,
version is on the website.
yeah.
There'll also be an audiobook form. That will also be available on like Audible
Hmm,
and all the
hmm.
like standard platforms once
Yeah,
that finishes production.
yeah. And I was thinking like something you could do either with the website or maybe it would be better to use, let's say, Substack as a distribution platform for something like this. But to write some posts kind of addressing the particular situations where you feel like people's
Mm.
confusions about this show up. So post number one I'd like to see about that is uh what are the um what are the things that got you stuck when you were trying to do AI stuff years ago that
Mm.
this would have clarified for you? Like, can you sort of
Ah,
write a dialogue with your, 2016 self or whatever year that would have been
right.
that would sort of explain some of this to him at that time? Right. And where he's like, or maybe it's not a dialogue. I don't know. There's a lot of different ways to structure it, but to really kind of highlight those problems in a way that might then really help show for people who are working on AI today the relevance of fundamental
Mm.
uncertainty. Like why help them see how they're already grappling with it and why what and see if they are help them to notice for themselves if they are currently attempting to resolve fundamental uncertainty in a way that it's not resolvable.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Um, yeah. Yeah, because like, for example, I don't know how much I don't think the book like really makes this clear, but like most of my research was into like uh questions about like how would we specify and then in particular like check to see if AI was aligned with human values,
Mm,
whatever like we sort of meant by human values, right? This
mhm,
sort of decomposes into like, well, what are human values, right? And then the
mhm.
epistemological part of it that like really sort of sucked me in and became the hard part and how this book came about
Yeah.
is, well, how do I validate it?
Right.
And this
How
like
do you really know? How do you know
that's
for
right.
sure, right?
Right. Yeah, and this validation question is like quite tricky. Because unless you are willing to commit um to more like something like moral realism, where you feel like, okay, like the what is like good is sort of knowable in some like abstract way that is independent of any particular person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we could like prove it, right? And we could prove it in a way that like we are confident of this.
Yeah.
And certainly some people believe that, right? And they have worldviews that sort of support that. But the more I dug into it, the more I was like, okay, I just like I can't support this for myself, right?
Mm,
And so this pushes me in sort of I guess you could say it's like an anti-realist stance, right,
mm.
towards morality. Um, Even though I like mostly try not to talk or think about morality, I mostly try to talk about norms and like leave like
Well,
metaphysical questions about like morality sort of off because
yeah, yeah.
in some sense it doesn't matter if like AI is morally good, right? All I care about is like, well, does it respect norms in a way that is like beneficial to not just myself, but all life.
Well,
Um,
right, but then presupposed in respect norms in a way that's beneficial to myself and all life is a morality,
Yeah, sure.
right? Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
there and
I think you get it back, right? Like, like these are like cutting like fine
I
distinction.
think like I think there is there's a thing that can happen where morality is treated as a philosophical problem
Mm,
or a theological problem, but I really mean philosophy, and then like theology sometimes shows up as a sub-discipline of
right.
philosophy and sometimes shows up as some other thing. And so when it's being this philosophical thing, uh, when when really morality is uh, I want to say something more like phenomenological problem, or
Yeah.
it's an enactive problem. Like it's um the like what it is to be moral is a situated thing that exists for a being with a perspective that is not a view from nowhere and a being with a particular skin in the game. And this is one of the reasons why um like a lot of thought experiments are super dumb. Like it's sort of like, oh, you're in this weird situation with a trolley and also
Right.
you've been imbued with all this perfect knowledge of how exactly trolleys work. And it's just sort of like, look, if I end up in that situation, my question is going to be, how did I get here? What happened? And not like, what should I do about this sudden disaster that I have no context on? Like,
Right.
like I might do something about that, but those are not even the most relevant moral questions to that situation. Like you have posed them to me. You in this
Sure.
conversation
Yeah.
with me in a kitchen, not standing above a trolley thing with a switch, have posed me these questions. But the real questions on my mind are not those. Like, I may or may not pull some switch, but the actual morality of that situation is, how did I get here? Like that's the actual situated
Sure.
question that would be on my mind.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think what you're reaching for there is you're saying, look, I don't want to talk about this as the philosophical kind of moral. I want something more like, no, like you have a sense of what goodness is. We want the good stuff. We want things that are good, and we want the things that are good that are not like the foreclosed, like short-sighted things that are good, like, just eating cake all day or whatever.
Right.
But we want the good things that are good upon further inspection that sort of keep unfolding as more
Yeah.
good things. And
Well,
again, you can call those some fancy word like coherent extrapolated volition, but actually it's just goodness,
yeah. Well,
like
and
in a certain sense.
I think that like there's a certain version of like like we come into conflict because there's like sort of competing needs here, but like um if someone like their greatest heart's desire truly was just to eat cake all day,
Hmm.
like kind of I want to let them. And like if someone's like for example, like I don't know, a virus like kind of just wants to infect cells, right? That is like its deepest desire.
Right.
And like who it's mostly a problem like not like the virus infecting cells is not on its own necessarily a problem. It's a problem because of then what happens
That's a
afterwards.
problem for somebody at some
Right.
point, who then might do something about it.
Right.
And then yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, so this is like tricky stuff I think to like
Yeah.
figure out exactly how to do, and I should say that like basically after I wrapped up like I started writing the book because I sort of wrapped up my AI research program
Mm-hmm.
and I kind of reached a point of like, okay, I took it about as far as I could. I see there's the wall. Like I determined I couldn't do the thing I wanted to do, which was sort of like have this like I sort of started out with this idea of, well, I would love to be able to just have like a mathematical proof. Like even
Mm.
if I can't uh
Execute it, even if it's
even
incomputable
if I
or
can't,
something.
yeah, I want at least like the framework in which like we could prove that like I have an
In principle,
AI
yeah.
and now I can prove that it is aligned with some kind of value system, right? That
Yeah,
was
yeah,
sort of
yeah.
the idea. Um, and yeah, digging down this path really showed me that, like, okay, that is like, in some theoretical sense, not possible, right? We may
Hmm.
be able to have like strong predictions about
Hmm.
what a particular AI would do in the future, right? But we can't really have this type of thing.
Hmm. It's
Um,
something like, I want to say that's not how life works, and AI
right.
is in this sense a kind of life. Like
That's right.
sort of in the sense that life and mind are not separate. Like they're both this sort of unfolding learning process, and mind is just like this is like the way that the free energy principle and active inference are the same thing. If someone wants a further uh, view on that, I'll link a video below.
Great.
Uh, but it's like the free energy principle and active inference sort of show that mind and life are like the same process, kind of at different levels or something.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's
and
right. I think that it was sort of a in some ways you could read the book. I think it's there's a there I talk about this with people all the time of like there's multiple ways to sort of read the book or like
Mm,
interpret what the book is about. Um, but one way to view it is that it's convincing you out of this position that yeah, all like abstractions are all I need, right?
mm,
Like
mhm.
and I think like, for people listening, they don't necessarily know like my background is in mathematics and also computer science. The type of person, and a lot of people in AI safety also have very similar
Yeah.
backgrounds, and the type of person that would want to like into a PhD program in mathematics is almost certainly uh,
Predisposed.
predisposed, yeah, to be a the type of person who
Who loves
wants to
abstractions?
make the abstractions
Yeah.
work. Yeah, to like
Yeah.
be able to do everything in the abstractions.
Yeah.
And certain it requires a certain amount of arguing against this to
Mm,
convince
mhm.
like it took me, a certain amount of time to really bump up against these things and see that yeah, they're actually I can't like abstraction my way out of this. I can't apply one more like theory that will like finally fix it and
Mm, mhm.
solve. I have to like instead the thing that is the fix is I need to go touch grass or whatever
Right,
like
right, right,
yeah.
right. It's this is touching for me a couple things. One of which is there was I had a conversation I think with Emmett at Softmax. For those who don't know, Softmax is an AI startup that I work at in SF that is yeah. I guess I said earlier maybe something. We're working on showing AI's care. So I guess I did. That was enough of an introduction. Anyway, we had a conversation about how uh, Softmax has a position sort of insofar as companies have views on stuff, opinions. That was also a position I shared prior to going there, which is part of why I did. That is a combination of moral realism and moral relativism. It fuses the two by saying, look, there are moral truths, and one of those truths is that morality is highly contextual, and that's kind of like it's like um that's just you could just take out the word morality there and see there are truths. One of those truths is that truth is highly contextual,
That's right.
actually. Um, um, and that's like a similar point to the point that you're making here, and seems to me to extend into the realm of what is good to do, where goodness is measured by in part usefulness to someone.
Right.
Like, and what it is to be like the realm of morality is the realm of uh getting along and and living well, given that you are not the only living thing.
That's right.
Something like that. Like
Yeah,
being
yeah.
able, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is why like many people they prefer to focus on like ethics instead of morality, right? Like they try to make this like distinction between the two, um, where they say like, well, look, let's not worry about these like metaphysical questions about like, if God is real, then like what does he prefer,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And instead just say, okay, well, look, we've got two people in conflict
Mm-hmm.
like or in people in conflict, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do we resolve that conflict in a way that is best for everyone involved in some sort of like reflective manner, I think, right? Of it's not just best immediately, but like on reflection, everyone
Yeah.
would agree, like, okay, yeah, this was
Yeah.
this was best for in everyone's best interest, even if I was involved in the conflict and maybe I didn't maximally get what I want. Like maybe
Mm-hmm.
what happened is I did something bad and the best outcome was I go to prison. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and even in these sort of situations, you're trying to figure out like what is really the best sort of like overall thing, and
Right,
get out
right.
of this selfish like view of just one person, I think.
There's a really neat video that I've been chewing on lately. I'm almost all the way through it a second time. Called "Is God More Than a Story?" And it's Brett Weinstein, Jordan Hall, and Jonathan Peugeot discussing morality, ethics, and game theory, and going into really precise detail about like group selection is kind of a confusion, but lineage selection is not. Like if you behave
Hmm.
in some way that is great for you and your children and your children's children, but then for some reason that type of behavior once it reaches your great grandchildren, causes them to all die with no kids, that's a dumb behavior, right? Like
Right.
that to adopt for you, that is not a fit way to live. Like the fitness of your lineage is a is in a sense ultimately what your fitness is, not whether you have lots of kids. That's actually a confusion. It's like that, yes, that matters. You don't get to reproduce if you don't. But if you sacrifice yourself in such a way that you save the entire kingdom or the entire tribe that you're part of, your all of your recent ancestors, you die, but all of your most recent ancestors
Hmm.
are saved from a neighboring threat, whether that threat is a fire or another tribe, then it's like that death was a fit thing to do on a
Right.
genetic level. And they talk about in this video how the they like there's a natural zooming out of the view of the self when you take this perspective. It's sort of like even your like your genes are actually allied with you taking this self-sacrificial view is
That's
kind
right.
of the point that they're making. And so they're talking about whether like the independent of the epistemic status of specific claims about metaphysics, like really detailed specific claims, you can talk about a function that religion performs is
Yes.
solving these game theory problems, which then makes it in a certain sense true. Which is not to say that all the details that people claim come along with it are the only true way to do things, but there is like it is true like an arrow.
Right. Yeah.
And so I'm interested in, yeah, like how do you think about how that's separate or similar to what you're
Yeah.
describing about the morality and fit to functionness of the way that we must go about making assumptions.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a very interesting topic, right? Like, um, sometimes I think that like people are both like too serious about religion and not serious enough, right?
Uh-huh,
And
uh-huh.
so like what I sort of mean here is that I think that like I don't mean for this to get like become like an overly like heated, like sort of ideological religious, discussion here, but like, certain some religions I think like have particular like memes sort of within them that make people like very serious about them, but make them serious about the wrong
Yeah,
things,
yeah,
right? So, certain strains of like Christianity, right? I'm just going to pick on it because that's probably what most people listening to this are like most familiar with.
sure.
And
Yeah.
like there are some strains of Christianity that sort of like eat the minds of their believers, right? And they like
Hmm.
make them super serious about things that don't actually help them like really live better lives. What they mostly do is help propagate the existence of this particular strain of Christianity,
Well,
right?
well,
And
right. And one of the questions is like, does it help propagate this particular strain of Christianity? First of all, mimetically by like taking over more minds. B, genetically by having more kids who actually will stick with the faith and not just grow up and be like, what's that, and throw it all
right.
off. And that's a huge issue. I mean, churches in general are facing
That's right.
rapid generational migration away. I've been reading a book about this called Church Tomorrow, question mark, which
Okay.
is a lovely pun name. Uh, and Anyway, more I could say about that. It's a good book. But the um, but again, going back to this lineage thing, if you as a religion, like we know that in some sense Christianity was healthy because it
Right.
lived as a memeplex for 2000 years. Not a lot of other memeplexes from 2000 years ago are still alive. However, the exact memeplex that anybody had 2000 years ago is also not alive, right? Its
Right.
descendants are,
Right.
right? We don't know how to bring it back to life in the form that it had. That may not even be possible with current minds.
Yes.
It's probably not, in fact. Um, and it has evolved into many strains, and you could in some sense those strains, there were many strains from very early on, but like you could certainly say that from a creedal perspective, right, the strains uh started having a half-life or something. There's like a we're it's actually very funny that we're at 2000 years now, because there was like creedal unity up until 1000, the year 1000,
Oh,
and then
sure.
you have
Yeah.
one split, and then 500 years later you have another big split, and that type of half-life terminates at 2000 years or something.
I
You
see.
see what there's like a something funny about that.
Yeah.
It,
Right. Yeah. At some point you reach like, right, the half-life is like you're splitting like every like 5 minutes or something like,
or
you
yeah,
know,
and Half-Life is not quite the phrase here, but there's a funny math too. If you have a split after 1000 and then another split after 500, and then I don't know if we can map when the other major splits were, right?
yeah.
But anyway, but the point I'm trying to get at here is actually is like um in the video, somebody, I forget which of them it is, I think it's Brett, says you can't start a religion, you can only start a cult. And if it turns out to be a healthy memeplex
Ah,
that like has kids and grandkids who, first of all, like live at all, right? If your cult causes you to die or not have kids, shitty cult. Um, not going to make it.
sure.
It's complicated, right? Because you have, monastics that sort of exist as
Right.
ideally symbiotes that don't themselves have kids and rely on the culture to have kids, but who hopefully sort of pay back in wisdom for the culture, right? You sort of like an interesting symbiotic
Right.
lineage
And I
thing,
think we do
right?
see some religions that like look like this, right? Where
Yeah.
the people that are the people that really fully practice the religion are all not having kids, right? They
Hmm.
are
Hmm.
like large parts of the religion are like just like sort of carved off
Yeah.
and for like the priestly class or like monks or whatever, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Only. And then the part that the public interfaces with is like kind of shallow, right? It's like, oh, we're providing some services of
Yeah.
things to you. Here's some like good luck charms. We'll like give you a blessing.
Yeah.
And
However,
if you have
however that's
extra
structured.
kids,
We'll
that you
take
don't
them.
know what to do with,
Yeah.
they can come live in the monastery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and but leaving that aside, it's like you start a cult. It's always a cult at the start, but then it can sort of evolve into a religion, but by just in fact being stable. And you sort of then you kind of it's stable because it's
Interesting.
been
Yeah.
going for a few generations, so it knows something about how to navigate life and the world and so forth. um but then the problem is that you then, when things change sufficiently from the original, you don't know if it has what it takes to navigate the current challenges.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. That's very true, right? Like
yeah.
I think I mean in some ways you just can't know, right? Like it's you're gonna have to wait a few generations to see, okay, did the thing that we did 100 years ago, was that a good or bad decision?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I think we
Well,
have some clues, but we're never going to be like totally certain about it.
totally.
Um,
And especially because, how do you run the counterfactual? Like, what was our alternative?
yeah,
It- you know,
right. Yeah,
and I think there's a kind of reasoning about what's good that sort of imagines that you can actually run the counterfactual and know what would have happened.
yeah,
Right? Like we can say, okay, and you can do this mentally in simulation to some extent, right? You imagine, oh, okay, suppose that we hadn't been such jerks to Germany after World War I and had not like shamed them
oh,
quite as much
right,
as we did. Would there have been as much of a possibility of the rise of Hitler? You can imagine. I think probably not. I don't know. Like,
right.
you know,
But what would have happened alternatively? Like,
right.
that's the other thing
And
that's hard
also,
to
like,
game
what's
out.
the counterfactual in which we do that? How would we have already had to have been different to have had the
Right,
inclination to do that? Like, where do you actually insert the change?
right, right. Because yeah, in some ways you'd have to go back like quite a long distance,
Yeah,
and then
like
like, would
in
that even be good?
yeah, in
Because yeah, like much of like what led to that
yeah.
is this like history that grows out of much smaller
Like
states.
ironically, actually, you can't. This is totally random. I don't even know if it relates to anything, but the actual counterfactuals that are most realistic to simulate are the ones where you didn't make a choice.
Hmm.
Like the counterfactual where a different sperm impregnated
Oh,
and Hitler was
sure.
never born. right? That's a very realistic type of universe to live in.
Right.
Whereas the universe where the victors of World War One had somewhat different ethics than they did and different beliefs about what would be good for things about how to set things up. Like that's like that's a way bigger lift in terms of like
Right.
number of bits you have to flip to get
Yeah.
over there.
Yeah, and these are like interesting questions. I mean, I don't mean us to go too far down this rabbit hole, but right, like, picking on this Hitler thing, like, I don't know, like, not that many people are actually like charismatic enough to be this type of like leader, right?
Hmm.
And to like, bring an entire country along to do a lot of things that on reflection, like they weren't excited about, right? And maybe even
Hmm.
at the time they like many of them wish they weren't doing, but
Right. Yeah.
sort of
Yeah.
spiraled into this like
Yeah.
direction, right? Um, and I think we see a lot of countries that like they just like fall apart and stay disorganized because there is just no charismatic person to like lead them in some
Mm.
direction to good or ill, right?
Mm. Mhm.
Um, and so yeah, you can sort of imagine a Germany that like actually just like limps along, right?
Yeah.
And probably like falls under like Soviet influence or something like that,
Right. Yeah.
because it's like a semi-failed state,
At that point. Yeah. Yeah.
like for a
Totally.
prolonged period of time, and it has like a non-functional economy,
Yeah.
and eventually goes like, okay, well, I don't know, the Soviets seem to like be doing some stuff. Why don't we try communism? And then you get like a very different sort of
Yeah.
world, right?
And so going back to uncertainty, it's like it's not only like you have to wait 100 years to know, you actually never get to know. Like
Right.
you like how your decision like
That's
even
right. We
if
have zero access to like counterfactuals in like some real sense.
yeah,
Like we can only like they're a thing that we can imagine,
yeah,
but I can't like reach across the void to another universe and just check
yeah,
and see how it would
yeah,
have turned out.
yeah. Um yeah. Um Jumping to somewhere totally different, but kind of
Yeah,
trying to like recenter us on this book.
sure.
Um it struck me somewhere early in this conversation with you that I was like, oh, this would be a really good book for teenagers to read. It was
Oh,
a random thought that I had. Um,
interesting.
and I think it's because there is a way in which, as a teenager, and you kind of gesture at this a little bit in the book with this sort of story of this fictional kid, Doug, growing up. There's a way in which, as a teenager, you're really grappling with this knowledge stuff.
That's right.
Like, you comment that most people aren't taught epistemology. It's like I went to a school that did the IB diploma where you have theory of
Yeah,
knowledge and
I did the same,
epistemology
so
class.
I
Okay,
had the same
interesting.
class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and but same class, it has a very weird curriculum, I gather. Like there's a lot of open-endedness for how the particular teacher approaches
Yeah.
epistemology class, right? And we, read Plato's Symposium and parts of the Bhagavad Gita and like a few other things. I forget those are the two I remember. There was something about Proteus, which I guess also is like, yeah, definitely very much about truth. Maybe Proteus was from the symposium. But anyway, but like as a teenager, you're starting to like the self-reference loops are kind of closing and you're starting to not just care about stuff and care about knowing stuff, but care about knowing that the stuff that you know is true and caring about whether or not you have a way to tell. Like you sort of start getting
Yeah.
really interested in that. And so I actually, yeah, I could really imagine um this book being valuable to teenagers. And that's another thing I think would make an interesting Substack post from you. Like
Oh, sure.
how would you, either to yourself as a teen, like when you started being curious about these things, like how would you try to articulate it?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's
what
really
like
that's
if
an
you were to
interesting
pitch the
question.
class or if you were to pitch the book as a text for an IB diploma
Oh,
TOK class, right? Like
yeah.
you're like, here is the thing to know about epistemology. Like this is a work on epistemology, right? Like how would you pitch it as an IB textbook or like as a not a
Ah,
textbook, but like
interesting.
a
Yeah.
supplementary,
Yeah.
one book among many, maybe next to the symposium or whatever. Like,
Sure. Yeah, this is a thing that's like for me, I'm in my like early 40s, right? And it's hard for me to know like like what do like 16 and 17-year-olds know today, right?
mm-hmm,
Because I think that I've been surprised at how uh like things have shifted, right? And now some of this may just be because of like my own education and stuff like that, but I got a version of education that felt much closer to like let's learn the classics,
Sure. Yeah.
right? Than I think that many kids are getting today, right? And I didn't have like I was very early on the internet, but even still
There just
just did
wasn't
not
that
have
much on there.
access. Right. I didn't have access to like the wealth of stuff that kids do today.
Hmm.
And I am sometimes surprised. I meet people in their 20s and they know things that like uh I just had no inkling of
Hmm. Hmm.
in my 20s because how could I have gotten access to that information? I
Yeah.
would have had to get
Yeah.
lucky stumbling on it in the library or something like
Yeah.
that. Um, so that is like a really interesting question because in my mind, this is like this is like a second or third book, right? Like that you really should have like read some other things before you read this book,
Mm.
in order to make sense of it. Um,
And what I'm saying is it's not obvious to me that that's true. I think
Interesting.
like I imagined also like my dad reading it and I was like, I think he would get something. I don't know that he would read it. It's like that I don't know that I could get him to
Sure.
read it. Maybe I'll bring it when I go home this summer. But um but I part of why I thought about him reading it was just that it's a good introduction to a bunch of the ideas that I'm
Yeah.
sort of swimming in, right? But I do think it functions as a good introduction in a certain sense. And again, especially for like a teenager these days does know how to look stuff up,
Right.
right? But I don't think they would have to like go read Gödel Escher and these other things. It's hard to know, right? I mean, we should get actual teenagers to read it and then just tell us what they
Yeah.
think, right?
Yeah. Well, this is partly, for anyone listening to this before August 1st, I have like an essay contest going on
Mm-hmm.
related to the book. Um, and so all the details are just on the website. But what was I going to say about that? Oh, yeah. Like, this is sort of an interesting place to like explore. Like, I know that, like, part of the reason I thought of an essay contest is um, sort of a random thing. When I was in high school, I had like never heard of Ayn Rand and objectivism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there was some like essay contest that was like, we'll give you like $1,000 like scholarship, like potentially if you like write a nice essay about one of her books, right? And like they
Mm-hmm.
chose the book and they were like, okay, if you read it and write a book, or write an essay
Mm-hmm.
and submit it. And I was just like, okay, sure, whatever. Like, I probably could use $1,000. I think I didn't understand how little money $1,000 was, but I was like, sure, I will invest like a month or two to like read this book
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and then write the thing about it. And so, although like I now have very different feelings about, her sort of like work, right? And how it whether it's true or useful, um it certainly infected me, right, in some sense, with like a bunch of like these ideas
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um from her. And I like that it was a little bit on my mind, like when I was like, oh, let
Well,
me do an essay contest, because worst case scenario, I can just infect a bunch of people with ideas from the book. So it is like, though, a legitimately interesting question of like, let's say like a high school senior
yeah.
like picked up the book, read it, and then like wrote an essay about it.
Mm-hmm.
What would that produce? Like I don't know. I'd
Yeah.
be very
It would be
curious.
interesting to have a like pick some age, maybe it's 19 or 20 or whatever, and say, we're actually going to have a separate essay contest that's like only for
Yeah.
high schoolers or teenagers or however you class it. I don't know if you want to bother doing that, but it might be neat.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it could be interesting. Yeah, I guess I think there's a lot of logistics that I have to figure out. But yeah, it is like
oh
a
yeah,
really
there might be
interesting
legal
idea.
stuff.
Yeah.
Who even knows? Um, but yeah. Um, cool. Um, well, we've been going a while.
Yeah, I know.
We
I feel like we've gone like maybe 2 or 3 times longer than
Yeah,
originally
no, it's
planned.
it's
So
been good though. I like getting talking about stuff, and I haven't haven't recorded a thing for YouTube in a while, in a certain sense. And yeah, I'm trying to feel into if there's anything else that's on my mind. Um,
Yeah, if we weren't being recorded, what would you be asking me about the book, right? Like, is there
Right, right, right.
any
Well,
stuff that like,
it's funny. I made a Google Doc and I wrote down one thing in it. I was like notes on this book, and literally there's like one thing. Like page 35 is like talking about the Bayesian sense of like never having 100 or 0% probability
oh
on
yeah.
something. And I was struck by the relationship of that and also like everything else in the book to this thing that I'm on about repeatedly around trust and
Hmm.
and I've sometimes described uh I have a few different ways of defining trust that are not even necessarily directly compatible, like they don't contradict, but they don't like it's not sort of obvious how to unify them. One of them is trust is what truth feels like in first person.
Okay.
And there's a certain sense in which, of course, like all truth is first person or whatever, but there's like but usually when we call things truth, we sort of like expect other people to agree with them. Like
Yeah.
we're saying not just this is viable for me, this works for me, I trust this. Like maybe I should trust my wife and you shouldn't. I don't know, maybe in particular,
Oh, I
I
see.
should trust
Yeah.
someone I'm loyal to and you should not if they're sorry, if they're not loyal to you, right? Like that's a whole thing. Um but yeah, like that's one bridge with this idea of like truth and the view from nowhere. It's sort of like, in a way, to call something true is to say, first of all, it seems so to me, but second of all, I'm pretty sure that if you investigated as well, you would come to the same conclusion.
Yeah, that's
Um,
right.
and then
Yeah.
there's other things for which that's not necessarily true. But they still they seem so to you, but you're like, I don't know if other people would in fact come to this same thing. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I think that well, and this does get to like some stuff that's sort of explored in the book, right? But it's like um it just could come down to like the way that you like the way you conceptualize the world and make sense of it.
mhm.
And so like uh the same like sort of like okay, this is like okay, what can I say here? Like I like wanted to say like, oh, the sort of the same experience of reality like could be interpreted different ways, but even that is like kind of a fraught, I think, like thing to try to claim that like, oh, somehow we have the same experience of some external reality, which we are also supposing like, exists.
Yeah,
But
I have extensive writing about this. There's one piece I have that sort of like tackles the freshman philosophy problem, and I think I titled it "Its Interfaces All the Way Fractal" is the name of the piece. Um,
yeah.
and um, it's an attempt it's an attempt to do a few things, but it's kind of basically trying to point at it's like to even say that we have the same experience of something is to say that it is compatible in the relevant ways. Relevant to what? Relevant to whatever is going on right now. Like that's you know like obviously, is my red your red? It's like, well, do we agree when we pointed all the red stuff? Like it's not that they're the idea that what's red for me could be blue for you is actually like is a type error, not just a
Yeah.
like what's red for me, like red and my blue actually have more in common with each other than they do with your red and your blue in a certain sense because they're both implemented on my neurons,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
but obviously like in a different in a pragmatic everyday sense, we can remove own um our own we can speak as if from the view from nowhere. We can remove ourselves
Yes.
from the description of what we're speaking of and speak uh uh in an assertional way about this is red,
Right.
even in a
Because we have like
presupposing way. We just say, pass me the red ball. And we don't have to say, pass me the ball that I perceive as red and that I believe that
right.
you will perceive as red as well. It's like, no, you need to be able to revert to those statements, which I call unforeclosing. It's like the ball that certainly does not appear to be anything other than red to me. Like these sort of like very chewy, mouthfully statements. We need to be able to do that when there is a weird co-epistemological problem that we're dealing with. But we also need to not pretend that we have co-epistemological problems when we don't.
That's right. Yeah, we mostly just like live in a sort of like consensus reality, right? And then like, but so I guess what I'm trying to bring up here is that like, yeah, there are like interesting places where, uh, this like this idea about truth, can like the consensus is sort of fuzzy, right? And this can like lead to some interesting things where, if I have a subtly different like conception of something that for the most part we seem to have consensus about what it means, um, because we have like sort of attached like different nuances to
Hmm.
something.
Hmm.
This can lead us to draw somewhat like different conclusions
Hmm.
about maybe what a claim means or something like that, right?
Totally.
And we could end up like disagreeing over the like little like bits, right? Even if we like agree in the majority. And I think like most of us have this experience of like you talk with somebody and you're like, "Oh yeah, I mostly agree with that except blah
Right.
blah blah,
There's this
whatever
other part.
this thing is." Yeah.
And I think that like in practice, and this is what this sort of maybe try to tie it all together. The thing um I'm talking about in terms of trust is very much about your own skin in the game, like your sense of you
Yes.
need to navigate the world somehow, and you're going to have an experience that certain ideas, certain claims, certain there are, I think it is actually in a certain sense correct and necessary to reject claims that sort of in some sense are true, but you can recognize would cause you to be depressed,
Ah, yes.
right? Like
Right.
and it's like you as an embodied being actually don't have a way to separate your like your, I mean, there's dissociation and stuff, but like in a certain sense, like you need actually the beliefs that are going to be most useful for you. And if you want to get people to believe uncomfortable things that they're going to be inclined to avoid believing, you should do the work of figuring out how they can believe them without being depressed. Like,
Right.
not just be like, oh, these people are idiots. It's like, no, you need to give them a livable version of your meme.
Right.
Like that's
Yeah.
your job. I mean, they might help. You might be able to convince some people to help by getting them depressed because you somehow convince them to sort of adopt it anyway, and then they like after years dig themselves out of their depression and produce a like modified version of your meme that eventually spreads. Like that's the cheap, lazy kind of mean way to do it, or something,
Right.
right? But like there's this idea that that's a fallacy to to not believe a true thing that would ruin your life.
Right.
But like
Yeah. I
and like there certainly is a fallacy or an error like that, right? Like this sort of head in the sand, like where you just like you're sort of short-sightedly. This is, I guess, the reason it's a fallacy is you're sort of short-sightedly avoiding some truth that would cause you a great discomfort today. When
right.
in like yes, you would end your marriage and you would have a whole giant shit show of a custody battle, and then you would get on with things and your life would be more true and would be less bullshit, right? Like if you like took in that your partner was cheating or whatever. Like um
Right. Right.
but
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that this is interesting because there's people can go online and they can find this. There's like the first draft of the book,
mm,
right? So just to tie it back to the book and make a little meta here. The and in that first draft, before I had done like so much like editing on it, a big thing that changed in the edits was the first version of the book was a little bit like in every section I'm a little bit like, all right, here's how I'm gonna blow your mind, right? Here's how I'm gonna like show you that
uh,
like you like are like misunderstanding how the world is, right? And like you should like deeply appreciate like this thing and you should see this like hard thing that you don't want to look at
mm,
because right. And over the course of like editing it, I realized, plus like just other writing I was doing, I realized that okay, this is like a kind of like high variance strategy that works on like a small number of people. Like it works well on me, right? Like if
mm.
you send me an essay that's like, "Hey Gordon, guess what? You just spent like your entire life
Confused
like
about this thing.
confused about this thing." Yeah. I would be like, I'm gonna eat that up. Like just like give it to me, right? But um most people actually hate this, right? They're like, this is the worst thing. They're
Uh-huh.
like, you say that to them and they're like, welp. I
Yeah.
definitely don't want to know about that then, right?
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
you know, or they just like they're like, ah, obviously this is like bullshit, right? Like
Yeah.
that's what goes off for them.
Yeah. This guy's trying to
So
sell me something.
right. So instead, like really, and maybe this is how the book came out, this way that like you feel about it, where it's like, feels relatively accessible is because um through the editing process was really figuring out how do I communicate these ideas without doing that, right? With instead trying to focus on, okay, like what's the thing that you actually need to know here? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and like stripping out the stuff, like almost every chapter, I think there are like straightforward implications of the things that are like said in the chat, like
Hmm.
directly in the chapter, that actually like you could reason out for yourself and probably should cause you to have like large updates about a bunch of stuff if
Right.
you
If
have
you like
like,
haven't noticed the ways in which you've been implicitly assuming blah blah
right,
blah. Right.
right.
But you're sort of like letting it unfold in them rather than trying to
That's
produce a
right.
particular.
That's right. Because
Yeah.
it turns out that, yeah, like trust was like very much on my mind because when the book wants to make like what is a fairly bold claim that like many people will like want to reject out of hand, right? Which is the statement that like truth is grounded in care, right? That is like
Mm.
the 5 word summary of like what people should walk away from the book with. Um, and like most people that I talk to, especially the people that I feel like need to read the book,
Mm.
uh, will like just sort of reject this statement
Yeah.
or like be suspicious of it, right?
Yeah.
So the book very much has to be how do I build trust across these chapters, each section, each paragraph, each sentence, so that when we get to the point where, okay, now I'm going to make the argument for this claim, there's some reasonable chance that you might like buy it
Mm-hmm.
because you are like, okay, I followed like Gordon along all this way. He hasn't like led me astray, right? Because
Right.
people aren't really just evaluating words on, okay, is this particular sentence
Totally. They can feel if
true?
you're trying to manipulate them. They can feel if you're
Right.
trying to get them to accept like there's a oh man, there's so much more we could go into here, but there's this whole thing about like, people I sometimes talk about like I like to do descriptivist epistemology,
Yeah.
not like how should we go about knowing things, but hey, we seem to be going about knowing things. How are we in fact doing that? And there's a sense in which we are all of us all of the time on a level before words doing the thing that you described that one of the characters in your book doing of like you have your way of evaluating what's true, and then you will accept a new way of evaluating what's true if it appears good according to your existing one.
Yeah.
And actually, just like that's all you ever get. And you
Yes.
you like you have an implicit one of those as you're born, right? Like you have a basic knowing system, a learning system that goes about knowing stuff. And eventually it starts to formalize some of its principles. And then it starts to notice that its formalizations are like a bit confused, right? And we're sort of recapitulating Keegan here in a way, right?
Yeah.
Um, where,
Right. We all have to overcome this like weak version of the Lobian obstacle, right? Like it's not the
right.
strong version that like an AI would
Like
have
the
to deal
full,
with.
yeah, or that a mathematician would have to deal with, right?
Right.
But we all sort of go through some process like that. Um, and that's and that you I think in the way that you wrote the book are sort of respecting that about people and you're just sort of like presenting like here's all these breadcrumbs here are all these ideas um take the ones that you're ready for like
Right.
and
Yeah.
and hopefully I've sort of laid it out with enough completeness that you can if you are ready you can sort of follow it all the way to the end but if you can't like I'm not here to like the book feels very gentle in the sense it's not here to something.
Yeah, that's right.
Like,
Yeah, at the end of the day, I very much view this
but you
book
are
as
clear.
like,
Like, you get to the end, and one thing that was like funny for me to read as somebody who has already been like chewing on these ideas of writing my own pieces and what's going on is the interface theory of perception the same as emptiness? Like,
sure.
questions like that. But like, getting to the end and you're like, hopefully, I've changed your view about this thing, and I'm like, no, but like. It was good. I enjoyed the ride. Like it was a
Yeah.
good tour of a familiar landscape. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I very much view the book as, and maybe this is a great place to end on because I know
yeah.
we've been going for a while. Um, is that I very much view the book as trying to plant a seed.
Yeah,
right?
I feel that. Yeah.
And that um it's much the way that like I can think of many books that like did the same thing to me, right? Like they planted seeds in me that I took, years, decades to like germinate, right?
Hmm.
And um now, I hope it doesn't take quite that long. I
Yeah,
hope it
yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
take like 30 years for people to like
Especially in
for
terms of doing anything about AI, but yeah.
that's right. But but that is sort of like as I like went through the process, I was like, and a part of it was humbling of realizing like what type of communicator am I? What kind of author am I?
Mm,
What do I really want to like offer to people who are going to like read this book? And I think in the end, I decided the best thing I can offer is I can put some stuff out there and you can, pick it up or leave it as you like it. But if you pick it up, what I hope it will do is, yeah, plant this like seed that will, eventually grow into adopting, figuring out the implications of the ideas that I think are like in the book, and you will make them real for yourself. In a way that like
mm.
I realized that I don't think I could like just download my entire like worldview into a book and like
That's not how it works
and
in a
convey it to
certain sense.
someone
Like,
else. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah. And that's sort of what the book is about.
That's right.
All right. Well,
Cool.
let's call that a wrap.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for suggesting that we do this and making this happen. This is
Yeah,
great.
glad you took me up on it. And oh my God. Okay. I just saw a thing that in the UI that made me think the recording had not been going the whole time. And I was like, come on, but no, it's being silly. Um, but anyway, yeah. Thanks so much. All right.
Yeah.
Take care.
Yeah.